Okay, so the Switch Lite is out a month and a half or so from now. We're going to take a look at the Switch revision. I think it's going to start showing up in stores this week coming up, and I'll be picking one up. Mostly the better battery life is very interesting to me. And then, of course, we'll tear it down, we'll check it out, and all that good stuff. But the Switch Lite is also very interesting, mostly because it is just a smaller form factor, so they had to shrink it a bit, the internals and everything to make it all fit. Has a D-pad and everything, smaller screen. But of course, it's completely handheld, which means they had to redo some of the insides and everything. And we've been wondering what that's going to look like on the inside. Well, interestingly enough, we don't necessarily have to wait to get a bit of a preview inside. Now, I say a preview because what we're about to see isn't a Switch Lite in front of me that is taken apart and looking all over it and everything. We're kind of limited to the images that the FCC had posted now. It's been made public, and these are internal photos of the Nintendo Switch Lite. And I wanted to go over them a little bit with you so we could take a look inside and see, I guess, what's changed and how they overcame a few of the obstacles because they had to eliminate the Joy-Con controllers, right? And we'll see how they did all of that. And then, of course, they had to incorporate the D-pad and then the analog sticks. We'll talk a bit about all of that as we look through some of these images. But as always, make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy this video and others. And let's see what's inside the Switch Lite. All right, so as I said, the FCC posted what were originally confidential images of the internals for the Switch Lite. In fact, what you're looking at right now is the motherboard directly in front of us. And I'll leave a link below to this setup here. You can go take a look. They posted a few of the revised Switch that's coming out, we think, this week. But to be honest, it looks so similar to the current Switch, it's really not even worth looking at right now. And they didn't even take pictures of the setup without this shielding that you see right here, which they did that with the Lite. So we can take a look at the full-on chip with one little issue that we'll talk about. Anyway, this is the Switch Lite in front of you. Now, the way you're looking at this is picture if you had your Switch in front of you, flip it over, and you're looking at the back. That's what this is. This would be going up against the back of your Switch, and you'd be looking at it if you just held it and you're looking at like the Switch logo or whatnot on the back of it. And you can see right away we have our CPU, our GPU, the Tegra chip right there underneath, along with 2 RAM chips. Again, similar setup to how we have in the current Switch. To the right and left, we also have other chips, which include the memory and then our wireless chips. Now, if I actually scroll down here a little bit, we can get a look at this without any of those plates on there, the metal. And they even labeled some of it. We have the NFC wireless IC to the left. To the right of that immediately is our memory chip, our onboard storage. To the right of that is our Tegra. To the right of that again are 2 RAM chips. Again, same setup we had before where we have the Tegra, 2 RAM chips, all of which has a plate on top of it, which then connects to a heatsink that runs up to a fan. All of that is still pretty much the same idea here. The bottom left, you can see the SD card slot. To the right of that, we have the WLAN Bluetooth wireless IC kind of all in one there. And then we have 2 antenna plugs above that. All of that is the same similar setup, but it's just kind of moved around a little bit here and there. Otherwise, what I'm seeing here looks very much the same. Now, all the way to the right. I mean, like all the way to the right. People were wondering if that is like a rumble motor. Some were confused about that. That is a grounding pin for the board that would ground to a plate that would be located on the back to the casing. That's all that is. That's not like a low profile rumble motor or anything like that. But we can see, of course, below that is where our battery will plug in. And then we have the USB Type-C. Now, if you look all the way up to the left, there is a rubber membrane there, and I want you to remember that because I'll talk to you a bit about what that is, and it's kind of interesting because that seems to be how they are getting around the triggers on the back. I was trying to figure out what that was initially. I said, wait, is this the front and we're looking at? And they flipped it, and that's like minus or plus or something. No, that's actually, that would be ZR. Yeah, that's one of the triggers right there, that membrane. I'll show you what I'm talking about, because you can also see the bumper up there as well. Below that is we have our plug-in for the analog stick you can see there, and then several other chips around it with our power IC. I'll have to read off that power IC chip when I get it, look under a magnifying glass, or maybe I could just make it out there a bit easier and see if it's the same power delivery chip, because I was kind of hoping Nintendo would change that around, as there was a really good posting on the Switch Reddit that kind of points to that as being a problem and why it bricks when you use third-party docks. And if you remember, I changed that chip out and my Switch came back to life from being bricked originally. So I would agree with that. Yeah, that appears to be a problem when it comes to third-party docks bricking your Switch and everything. So if we go down a little further... actually, first I want to point this out. The Tegra chip right there has a bunch of thermal compound on it. Unfortunately, we can't read the numbering or any type of identification numbers off of it, but I will say this, the chip appears to be different physically. It's hard to make it out here, but if you look at the components, the resistors and everything that are located on there, if you compare it to the current Switch, the current Tegra X1, it is different. Specifically, kind of around here, those resistors are in different spots, different patterns than what we have on this one. So it is slightly different. I don't know what they've done to the chip. I'm not sure, because something has happened to give it better battery life. People are speculating right now about different fabrication process and everything, but we'll have to get it in our hands and really take a look at it to see what's happened. I also believe that the same chip is going to be used in the NVIDIA Shield TV this year that's coming out. That will most likely be the easiest place to see what's happened, considering that'll be a bit more accessible than the Switch chip, all right? This is most likely going to be the same chip that is in that revised Switch that'll be out this week. So if anything, we'll get a look at it there and see what's been used to get a much better battery life, right? We're talking 30 to 40% better in some cases. So yeah, something happened there to make that battery life better. So let's scroll down here a bit more. This is, if you see here, we have our front-facing. These would be the ABXY. The D-pad would be, this is like if we're looking directly at it, right? Like, so we're looking at it. That's ABXY. That should be our plus button at the top there, that little yellow button. And then we have our R right there, right? Our R button there. So down here we have home, and these are the clicking type, similar to like the 3DS, or I guess what we know kind of now with them. And these will be a bit more, I guess they'd be more like squishy buttons, right? Like what we've been used to before on other ABXY setups and everything. And I think that's gonna be good. So let me explain what I'm talking about when I say that it's going to feel like squishy, similar to the Pro Controller even. I quickly put this up here as a comparison, just real quick side by sides. On the far right, you can see the Joy-Con buttons for the ABXY. It's similar to what the 3DS is in that D-pad where it's more clicky. And of course, if you have a Joy-Con now, you would know what they feel like. But if you look to the left, you can see the Pro Controller and the Switch Lite. Those buttons are pretty much exactly the same pattern, pretty much same everything. So what I'm seeing here is that the Switch Lite is going to feel pretty much the same as what the Pro Controller does, at least for the ABXY. Now, when it comes to the D-pad, I'm not sure, but if it's sharing the ABXY, there's a good chance that it could even be sharing the D-pad. We'll just have to wait and see on that one. But think about it this way. If you like the feel of your Pro Controller face buttons, you'll probably like the feel of the Switch Lite face buttons. Here's the thing. I was hoping they would have a shot of the D-pad. Unfortunately, they do not appear to have a shot of the D-pad. All right, so here's the back, right? This is the back of the Switch Lite. And if we scroll down, this is with the backing off. Now, you remember I told you about that rubber membrane that was at that top left? Here is where that rubber membrane is, and you can see ZR sits on top of that, and when you push down, it seems to kind of pivot backwards and click. That's how they're getting around that and everything to get a bit more, I guess, just to make it so it works with a one-piece design on the motherboard. That one's not separate. However, the other one is. If you look over to this side, this is where our D-pad is. Unfortunately, there is no shot of this board out. Okay, but we can't see it. I don't know what the D-pad is, what I can even gauge it to be like. I think it's going to be more of a squishy, a D-pad we're used to, not necessarily a D-pad that we build out of the left Joy-Con currently, right? Where we'll put a D-pad over the clicky kind of buttons. I don't think that's going to be what it is. I think it's going to be a traditional feeling D-pad, which is good. But unfortunately, there is no images of this board out of it. Most likely, they don't need it to be out of it. They mostly wanted to focus on the wireless module PCB. This is actually wired in. Normally, the Joy-Cons would communicate wirelessly. This does not do that. We have several plugs. This one's not even plugged in, by the way. They just left that thing unplugged. It's like, you know what? Who cares? It looks like that would plug in here, and then we have two other plugs here that run down and around behind the battery. So, interesting setup. I assume the battery was going to be there because that was the best spot for weight. It would help weigh down this side. Basically, it's going to work to make the whole thing balanced. I guess if it was down here and they did the board up top and played around with that, this most likely was the best way to do it. It is a smaller battery. You can see right there, right? They've already told us it's a smaller battery, so we already know that, but it still gets better battery life than the current Switch. And of course, that could be a number of things. The more efficient design inside for the chip, the smaller screen. There's a number of things that could play into that. The heatsink looks slightly different. I think there's a bit more of a bend to it and everything. And otherwise, it is I think a pretty good looking design inside for what they're working with. And they're trying to fit the Tegra chip into a smaller design. I think this is a good way to do it. I really wanted to see the analog sticks. And I'll tell you this. The cables here. So this is our plug-in for an analog stick here. And our other plug-in for analog stick is over here, it looks like. Those look like the same cables. That's all I'm going to say. All right. So from the ones that I've replaced, checked out, I've opened way too many Joy-Con controllers at this point. That looks like, I know people don't want to hear this, that looks like the same type of analog stick connector. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the same exact analog stick, and they could have played around with the design and fixed it up. But just from what I'm seeing right now, it kind of looks like it, to be honest. Unfortunate, yes, especially if it ends up being the exact same analog stick. But here's hoping that when we get it, it won't be. I'll also check out the design, the redesign for the Switch. But that's just going to come with Joy-Con controllers, and those I assume would be the newest ones. So maybe that would give us a bit of a preview to if they've changed them out. It also appears that I think the speakers are a little different. This is just going off of the image in front of me. I'm not, holding it or anything. But I believe the speakers are these two gray pieces here. Okay. I don't know what the sound quality is like, but they appear to be different unless I'm missing it. But it looks like these would be our speaker cable plugins here. And it looks like they're both running to those large gray pieces with several screws to hold them down. So that could be good or bad. I mean, the quality could be better. It could be worse. We'll have to see when it comes out. But so far, I look at this design and I do see, to be honest, a lot of the 3DS stuff that they did there in here where they're running cables around, like these flat cables. Like this one here really reminds me of a 3DS, a new 3DS XL, to be honest. Similar to these up here as well. But it does look like they carried over some of the ideas and engineering from there over to this system to make it all work kind of as a handheld. But still a lot of questions here. The D-pad I cannot see from this, so I can't tell you if it's upgraded from what we have with the Pro controller, or maybe it's better when it comes to button presses. Maybe it feels better. Unfortunately, they did not need to focus on that. They just had to focus on everything here that had the wireless modules and everything to it. This did not have any kind of wireless at all, it seems. So there you go. But let me know what you guys think about the preview, I'll say, to the internals of the Switch Lite. I'll leave a link to this down below for you guys if you want to look into it yourself a bit more. But so far, I like what I'm seeing here, and there's still a lot we need to figure out. And I guess we'll start with that revision for the Switch when it drops. Hopefully this week I can get a hold of one, and we can tear that thing down. So make sure you guys keep an eye out for that so you're subscribed, and we can hopefully rip it apart and see that chip, because otherwise it looks pretty similar. Thanks guys for watching. Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it, dislike it if not. I'll see you guys next time.